Hey everybody, this is Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today I want to show you how to paint a red shiny Christmas ball in watercolor and acrylic. So this is going to be really different from what you've seen out there. I'm not just going to talk about the differences between acrylic and watercolor and general concept stuff. I turned off my own sound and it was off. I have no idea. I had the chat going on my phone. This is live.
I had a tech panic that I left a camera on.
So what is different? Before the algorithm moves on. Wait, because we have to worry about it too. But what's going to be different about this one is that I'm going to tell you what you actually need to know as a beginner about how these mediums work. I'm going to give you useful and actionable information that you can leave this class today and then be able to know more about how to paint both of these mediums and know how to paint a red Christmas ball in both watercolor and acrylic. So it's a full lesson, and it's a lesson that's going to explain to you what you need to know as a beginner about these two mediums. So I think it's actually pretty exciting. I pitched it to John. John's like, what? And I'm like, well, it's getting to be that time of year, and it's fun to learn to paint reflections, but I have watercolor audience and acrylic audience, and I think I can really bring you guys together. I know in our core we got some watercolor and we got some acrylic core, but I think you guys are about to discover everything you have in common.
I think that's
or
great.
Medium. All right, so let's go over the materials first.
I just want to make sure. Now we're starting out with acrylic, right? No,
watercolor.
We're starting out with watercolor,
but not either of those yet.
Okay.
Remember, we're going to do the techniques first.
That's right.
And then watercolor and then acrylic.
Okay.
And that's how this is going to go down. I'm going to show you the techniques and core information you have to make the paint go and the tools work, just the basics. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to paint this object in watercolor and show you how I got it done. And that way you know what you should be looking for, expecting, what you're going for. And then I'm going to paint it in acrylic. And you're going to really see how there's a core conceptual difference on how we create this same object across both paintings using different media. And I think it's just a fancy way of saying if I use watercolor, I got to paint it different than when I paint it acrylic, and how I think about that changes. Mm-hmm. Just kind of what we're doing here. So importantly, to be able to do this, I'm working in a multimedia pad. So I'm not going to a watercolor pad and then a canvas. I'm going to do a multimedia pad. So the surface and the environment is the same for both. I have picked the Fabriano 1264 mixed media. That's 120-pound medium tooth. So the surface of the paper, kind of smooth, not as rough as cold press paper that I normally use, but it's not as smooth as if it said hot press. So medium tooth. Tooth is they're trying to tell you how rough the paper is. To paint on paper with acrylic, you do need a paper resilient enough for that. This is the minimum. I love this pad. It's the 9x12. Right. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see, I also like because this has got perforated edges here, so it's easy to remove these, and 9x12 gives me lots of room to work this out. So that's the pad. That's why the pad, you can use what you have. If you have questions today, put those all in caps. If the mods have the answers, they'll get them to you. If I have the answer, it might be answered live on the show. Let me explain this crazy mess that is and I'm going to draw, can we see this across here? I hope we can.
I was going to say here.
Yeah, we can see that. See that little line?
Yeah.
Okay, everything down here is watercolor. And this is going to start to tell you things that you don't know as a beginner, but you should know. So up at the top is my acrylic paint. I have Ultramarine blue. I have Quinacridone Magenta, which is the magenta deep in the Senale line. I have Cad Red medium, Titanium white, Mars black, and in the middle I have Cad yellow. Now over here I have Pyro red. Pyro red in watercolor is an alternative warm red. It's very similar to Cad. It's not any cheaper. It's just a lot of times people don't work with cadmiums in watercolors because while they have a coating for it in acrylic when they make it, it's more dangerous to make in watercolor. So it's just, you see it less. Like lead, you see it, but less. And you don't ever see lead in acrylic because you can't bind it up. So there are some differences in colors, but Pyro is a great alternative to Cad. Quinacridone Magenta right here. I have Ultramarine blue, and you can see even between those two, they're a little different, but they're the same. Then I have, this is Lemon Yellow Lake. This is a lake yellow. And so it's almost like an Azo yellow, but that's close. I could have done a Hansa yellow. And then I have Payne's Gray. Now, here's something very important. See this tube of watercolor?
Mm-hmm.
This is a giant tube. This is like 1.5 of these.
Wow.
For how far it goes. It's tough to paint before your paint is coming out of the tube. And you might not have known this. Watercolor comes in tubes like acrylic, not just in the pans that you remember from high school. Or maybe your recent painting, but the dried pans. Thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate that so much. So if you think about watercolor, there's the little half pans that are dried, and then it comes out of the tubes. Believe it or not, in watercolor, those are the same. Because watercolor doesn't dry. What would happen if I left my acrylic out all day? It would dry and I can never use it again. It's just a dry ploop of plastic, right? It's done. Can't reactivate it, can't bring it back. This watercolor, when it's dry, I can re-wet with water and reactivate it and use it again kind of indefinitely. I mean, there's people that find really vintage watercolor, really old, and they can reactivate it because the formulation is old, it's simple. These are, I think watercolor is a little better for the environment than probably acrylic or oils. It's certainly more transportable. And once the initial expenses are over, I think it's actually less expensive to paint in.
Right.
So those are things you need to know. The size of the tube. I put out way more than I need.
Right.
So you could see it. If I put out what I need, you would not be able to see it. So I put out way more than I need. I'm using a wet palette. You can use a wet palette with watercolor. Now let's go over some things you don't know about watercolor, or you might not know about watercolor or acrylics. The first is the brushes.
Now, are these techniques here?
We're going to do techniques, yes.
See, I've got this thing that I wanted to see.
Technique, excellent. So we're going to do some techniques. And I'm going to get one of my round watercolor brushes. So watercolor brushes generally are made with natural hair. Often squirrel or Kolinsky sable, or they used to do mongoose. It's illegal now. A lot of them are illegal. And a lot of them, even though paint companies don't murder animals just to make the brush, they do partner with the fur and animal trade to get these made. So I'm actually, everything here with the exception of my Escodas by Jasper Stardust are all synthetic. So this is natural squirrel. And this is a handmade brush. You can find Jasper Stardust on Instagram, and he makes these crazy brushes. But everything else is synthetic, but performs like hair. These brushes hold more water, and they stay wet longer. And everything you would hate in an acrylic brush, these are great for. So sometimes what makes a great watercolor brush would make a terrible acrylic brush. And you can do most of your work with a round. I'm going to grab, this is a number 8 round. It's brand new. I'm going to just pop it right out of its little tube. And it's stiff at first, but when you rinse it out, right, it'll be soft. And I don't really drag that much water off, maybe 1 or 2. When I come in to work this paint, I have it very wet, and you can see I wet the Blupa paint to a wash, right? So see how where I put the paint down, the colors there. Now my canvas is on a tilt, and that'll be something that we have to think about when we're painting with watercolor, because look how that runs down, right? I have workaround for this, and actually I like a tilt. I like things to kind of be in motion a little bit. Right, so there's that. The next thing that we're going to learn is I'm going to make a little area wet. And I'm going to get some of my ultramarine blue here. You'll notice it just very little color makes a lot of paint. And I'm going to come here and just touch my brush in. And you will notice that the paint travels through the water. And where it's going right here, see that drop? I really want, when I'm doing this on here, I will be wetting the page until no drops collect. So the page will be wet. I'll show you the amount of wet it'll be. See how this is wet, but even with it dripping down, it's not collecting in the big drop. I'll grab some magenta here. Right. And the next one is if I come here and I load up with some paint, but I don't get a lot of water on it, and I come here, I got to get it on my paper towel. I can also dry brush. Let me get a darker color. There you go. See, I can dry brush too. That's where I sort of can see some of the paper underneath. So I have a direct method where I paint with the brush with color. I have a wet in wet method where I add color to a wet area. If I'm painting wet into wet, the colors blend on the surface. The other thing you need to know about watercolor is in acrylic, you start to see the painting well before it dries. In watercolor, because the binder is the paper, because the pigment is sinking in and settling and diffusing out, you almost have to allow your watercolor to develop. You'll also notice on my load, right? So my brush here, I'm going to load it with the yellow. I'm coming from the end. It's not a thick load. I'm not scooping paint, am I? I'm wetting it and pulling it. There's no paint on my brush, like a gloop on the tin. So a lot of times when I see artists going from acrylic to watercolor, I'll see them try to paint the paint opaque and thick like this. And that's not what you want to do. We're not doing thick paint where we paint like acrylic. These are going to be washes. They're going to have more water in them. We can paint thicker if we're using gouache, which is an opaque type of watercolor. But in this one, we're going to be doing transparent applications. Okay. I'm going to rinse this out and I'm going to grab a round brush. This is the equivalent to my round there. This is the Raphael Sepia, and you'll notice it's stiffer. I want a stiffer brush. This is definitely Taklon. I don't want hair for this because I'm using heavy body paint. And I'm going to come here and you can see immediately my load is different. I pull quite a lot more paint out and I pull it into the brush, loading the belly of the brush. So where the water with acrylic, I really have to load the brush to get that. So I can paint a direct method. I can, on paper, do watercolor techniques with my acrylic. I just add more water and I can run it out like this. I can even do as light as this. The reason this works on paper is because, again, the paper is the binder. So as the acrylic dries and pulls into the paper, it binds. You don't have to worry about underbinding. So even if you don't have any watercolor, if you wet out your paint in the same method I'm wetting out mine, you'll be able to do some similar techniques. Some things that will be different is watercolor lifts back up, erases. You can even erase it when it's dry a little bit, pulling color back out of the paper. The acrylic is very staining. And once it's layered on very thickly, it seals the paper and doesn't hold into it anymore. So that is something that you've got to realize. So much less water. I'm doing thicker applications. It would be okay for me to come in with acrylic and add paint in this thick way right here. See how I'm putting out some thick paint? That's perfectly okay, but I would not do that with watercolor.
Yeah.
The final thing that I want you to know as a beginner, just as your introduction, and then we're going to get into actually painting the object, is that both paints have what we call color shift. And color shift is just a fancy way of saying that it changes how the color represents to the eye. Generally going lighter or darker.
So hold on just a second. We're seeing an error here, and I'm gonna just do one real quick because I don't want you to lose anything with everybody. So I'm gonna reset this just real quick so that we.
And we're recording this, right?
We are.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna do just give us a momentary. We're gonna give it a blip because it's. Everyone says it's all of a sudden crazy buffering.
And I have it. I have it set on automatic ads.
Yeah. Oh well, that could be why. But give it a moment. I have it.
No, where you do it.
Oh, I know, but I've got it set for that too. So what I'm gonna do,
I tried to set it up where it was only that, and maybe that threw it.
I'm gonna give everything a moment to catch up because it's still buffering.
All right. Well, I could use a coffee being heated.
Take coffee. Hold on, just a second.
Oh my goodness! And we have some thank yous to do.
Now
we have a Deb we have to thank
maybe see
in
if
a Ramona.
Excellent connection. We're back.
All right. Well, first, Deb and Ramona, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that so greatly. And then Brenda's like, I guess I'll have to come back after it's uploaded. Mine is frozen. Sometimes if you log out and log back in.
Yeah, and
maybe we'll record the next one of these.
We have this recorded already, but it is buffered.
It is buffered.
I think we're okay.
We're okay? All right.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
So I was saying something and then, color shift. It's a fit. So what I was saying right before John notified me is that both paints have color shift. Watercolor has color shift and acrylic has color shift. Where it's different is acrylic will get darker And sometimes the finish of the paint will be shiny or matte, depending on the polymer and the pigment in the thing, or unless it's specifically designed to be matte or shiny. But it can, have you ever noticed that in a painting? Some colors will be super shiny like your docks, and other colors will be uber matte. So this will be that. This will seal the paper. This has color shift. This is color shift lightens. So as you lay down the watercolor and it diffuses and it blends out and it works its way into the paper, it's also lightening. So those are the things to be aware of when you're painting watercolor acrylic, is they both have color shift, but they shift different directions. All right, let's put up a step. Let's do the watercolor one.
All right, so now we're going to move into watercolor, right?
Yes.
So this is the official watercolor.
Watercolor.
And this is going to be step 1 of
Now,
watercolor.
I will, when we're done with this and we get it all up, I'll throw up a traceable for you guys, but I'm going to show you how I would put this in, because I'm just studying the craft, right? So what I'm doing right now is I'm just studying how a reflective ball looks and how I would paint that in paint, and by doing it in watercolor and acrylic, if I did this in watercolor and acrylic and pencil and oil pastel, I would really understand this one, like Christmas balls, so much. So that's what I'm doing. Now, just in case you haven't run out and got art pencils, I'll be a sweetheart and use an HB. That's a regular school pencil, but I do like a darker pencil. This is a 4B. I actually like that. Actually, I may do that because it's the line's going to show for you better. Now, in watercolor, the line showing through is completely normal. That is the preference of the artist. I do tend to use a gummy eraser to erase or change my lines, and that is because it doesn't interfere with the surface of the paper, because in watercolor, the paper is everything. Paper's the first thing you upgrade. Paper's the first thing you care about. All right, so I'm going to take my pencil. This is the Faber-Castell 4B 9000. And I know it's like, it sounds like, so it is. It's the 9000. Right? Let's see.
You know what Shakespeare said in art class?
What?
2B or 4B?
Because, yeah, we're 6B
that is the
or
question.
8B. So I'm using a ruler, a tape thing, and the inside tape hole is, I'll give you the measurement, 3 inches. And the outside is 3.5. Either would be fine. I'm using this because, I'm going to be honest, my freehand circle skills, meh. You could use anything that let you have a round line. I'm doing this dark enough for you to see it. I kind of recommend that you work lighter than this, but again, you know, if you're doing something called line and wash where you see the lines and then do watercolor washes over it, it's totally allowed. Once I have the basic shape on, I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a top. I'm going to come up a little bit on either side. Right? And so this is where the bulb would have a glass ball that pulls that up. There's a slight arc at the top of I know it's light.
It's very light. It's okay.
But that, you guys want it to be light. If you can, you should be able to see it on your paper, but it should not be disturbing to you.
And I'm going to lightly say thank you to Heather, Ramona, and Deb. Love you guys. Thank you.
Now it's just this loop sketch of the loop that's up here. The other thing that I may want to sketch is the little segments coming down, right? Because they're important structurally. So I'm going to just make some little segments coming down, over, and they point over, and then you can, I might even imply those little hatch marks in those centers, because again, line and wash. That's pretty perfect. Now, we know we've got a reflection here, and I'm not going to use Frisket today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very lightly sketch where I think my high reflection will be. Even though I'm going to wash over them, that will help me kind of keep them in mind as I go. So you can see that what I'm doing is I'm just sketching a little bit of them. I can put them back. I've got acrylic here, so I can put all the reflections back I want. And then the other thing I'm going to want to have under here is kind of an ellipse. So an ellipse is a squish circle, so I'm going to sketch that under my ball. And that's because I've got my light coming down here, and there's going to be a shadow cast from the ball. The ball also casts light to the floor, and the floor reflects up. So those are all things that I will think about as I'm working. Now I'm going to get my number 8 Raphael imitation Kolinsky. No Kolinskys were harmed in the making of this brush. It's a pretty big one. Most of the painting you do in watercolor is done with around, and I'm going to go ahead and wet. Remember, my is on a tilt. Everything inside the ball and then around.
Is this another step?
This is yeah, this is another step. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm in the habit of working fast in watercolor. Step 2. We're going to wet everything inside the ball, but not the reflections that we drew. We're also going to wet up inside between the little metal prong downs. And we need to do this so that we can paint wet into wet before it dries. What you'll see me doing is where the water is thick, I will just pull it down, because even on this tilted paper,
adjust it a little bit.
The water tends to go where my brush puts it, and even if gravity is pulling it, it will honestly, there's a sort of surface tension that prevents it from running all over the page. So I can grab the water that has come down from gravity and move it back up into the ball. Now, a lot of times I don't even pre-sketch out the reflections. I let them happen kind of accidentally or organically. I kind of know where they are, but I let them happy accident more than you might actually think. Now, if we have too much water at the bottom, that's fine. You just pull it up, and then I can wipe off on a paper towel. I always have a paper towel near me when I work in watercolor. And I'm going to start with a very light red. So I'm going to come here. No, wrong one. That's acrylic. This is going to be fun for me. I'm going to come down here to my Pyro Red, the equivalent to my Cad Red in my watercolor. And you can see I've wet it out. And I'm going to smudge and move around a little bit of this around the ball. Now what will happen is where the paper is wet, and I'll kind of try to work around here to see these reflections. I can always put them back with acrylic, but I'd prefer to save them on the paper. In acrylic painting, the white paint is our white, but in watercolor painting, the paper is our white. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. You guys ask me all the time, can I paint this in watercolor? Can I paint this in acrylic when I paint a watercolor? And what I'm going to say about that is that yes, they just paint a little differently. Notice that I'm just working everything through, and I'm trying to work quickly enough so that my paint isn't drying on me. Can I soften it and improve it? Yes, I can. Absolutely. But in watercolor, one does tend to like the immediate work that you can do first. Now, an interesting thing I'm going to do, I'm getting clean water, and I'm going to pick up any extra little water here on my bulb. Get it on my paper towel so it's damp. And I'll go ahead and just lift up a little bit of this reflection. See how I'm doing? That's what acrylic doesn't do great, is the lift. So I've kept some paper white, but I'm lifting up a few reflections. So work an area a little bit if I want to. And as it dries, you can see it sort of softens, and sometimes it feels like it almost is painting itself. I'm going to come here and sort of crisp that up a little bit. But because the paper is damp dry, so there's 3 stages of paper really. There is bone dry, wet, and then cool to the touch with no obvious water on it. When you notice that your paper is still damp, but not wet, you can get a crisper line, but that line will just soften a little bit. And so that's a lot of times how you get those soft diffused bokehs is in the planning, right? When do I get the bokeh? Do I work it wet into wet in the initial diffuse when I'm washing out, when I'm putting a lot of color out in wet washes? Or do I do it when the paper is cool dry and I want it just a little diffused, but I definitely don't want it to have a sharp edge. I'm going to rinse my brush out. And I've got some brown over here, so I'm going to take my red, and you saw that I moved it away from the red, and I'm going to grab some yellow, and I'll move it away from, and I'm going to get orange. Now from here, there's two ways to get brown. I can add blue to this and red, and you can see I go right into the brown, or I can work black. So it's green with an orange. It's your two secondaries. And I'm going to come here, and I haven't pre-wet the paper. I'm going to just sketch around. All right. Let us call that a step.
Okay.
A very light step. Thank you. Congratulations for being a member 33 months. Woo! All right. Isn't this fantastic? So there we are. It's pretty light, though, from our reference. And the watercolor will be lighter than our reference. Watercolors won't, you can get them as saturated as life. You're going to want to rock that into some cold pressed paper and some other, like, some crazy, but we're going to get there. Right now we just got to get this first layer on, like acrylic. Layers are everything.
I'm going to do my best here to see if I can adjust, because I think we were so I tend to adjust the cameras for acrylic.
Yeah, no, and it's going to be light, and I think that's good for you to see because we'll get there. Now I'm going to come underneath my ball, and where I drew my ellipse, I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of water. The red is now dry, or at least cool dry, so this isn't going to just bloom up into my ball. Not that that would necessarily make me feel like I threw everything away. And sometimes I'll take my water out a little further just so that I get a nice diffusion. I'm going to take a little bit of my Ultramarine blue and my Payne's gray, which is my equivalent of a Mars black on this. And I'll come close to the ball. And just let that be out a little bit. And I don't necessarily need to negotiate with it too much, but I will soften it around. You can see I'm kind of taking a damp brush and working into the damp. And then I'm going to go into my dark. That's my gray. I'm going to come underneath here. And I can bring this down a little bit with the damp brush. I might want it to be a little more. So dark right under the ball. And then diffusing out as it comes out, because that's what our lighting is showing us that's happening. And see, it's just like, because the water blends and flows, it really works for us. Now I'm going to get a little of my dark here. I'm going to add a shadow there. And come on this edge, and you can see I can just really get some fine line with my brush, and it's just about making little touches. Now a little blue and gray, and it's a very light wash, so just clear water, barely anything on the brush. And we're going to just add our first light wash of our cool metal, right? So this is our silver metal. All right, let's call that a step. I'm going to take my Quinacridone Magenta and my Ultramarine blue together, and I'm going to mix a lovely purple. And I'm going to start to add a little bit of a shadow coming around the ball with my purple. Just brushing this on carefully. If I lose my little white balls, that's okay. I can put those back. Now I'm going to grab a paper towel. I guess I'll grab this one here. So this is just a regular paper towel, and you can see I can tap that up and sort of lift some of that color. And then I can go into my ultramarine and make a much darker one. You can even get your Pyro Red involved, and it works just like Diox and our Cad Red. So if I come here, and then I'm going to make sure that there's a darker color down at the bottom. Just sort of dry brush a little bit up here. Bring a little shadow up into the stem. It is easy to add color and difficult to remove it with watercolor. So a lot of times you will see that artists will sometimes be just really trying very hard to not have to remove anything. So I'm going to come right here with more red. You can see that's just much thicker up into the shadows around the silver. My brush is wet. And come pick up that extra little drop that was starting to get away from me and put that there. Now in the middle, I'm going to add a little bit of that. So most Christmas balls, if they're not mattified, and actually John and I were talking about this a lot, is that a lot of photographers use matted or satin or not shiny balls because the ball shows everything in the room.
Right.
So it's just really difficult for them to get a clean shot of it without a reflection of them in it.
Yep.
And so they have a tendency to not do that. I'm bringing this and I'm curving this around the shadow. I might go ahead and rinse out a little bit, doing a soft rinse out. Notice this here just washes. And that's where a lot of times you guys get frustrated, is in finding the balance between the water and your brush and the paint. I'm going to go ahead and kind of still save that idea of where that is. And if you come in with a little light, clean water and you butt it up against that hard line, what will happen, it will continue to soften. It's kind of awesome. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my purple into my red. So that's my Quinacridone, a little Ultramarine blue, and a little of my Pyro Red. And I'll just try to bring this as crisply down to the bottom as I can. Sometimes crisp is a little hard in watercolor, so you find out just thinking, making sure that that shadow is well placed. Adding a dark one. Now I've got just a damp brush. And watch, we're going to start to let this all soften. So if I come there, see how it's got a hard edge, but it softens on one spot. And that's sometimes what we're trying to do, is how do we get a hard edge and then soften it on one spot? If I come back over and I smidge it, and if I go over that again, that will soften that line. Now I'm going to come in here and get some of my red. And I'll do some curved strokes, kind of talking a little bit about that ball. A little bit heavy on the pigment there. I'm going to come around this outside edge. Heavy on the pigment. And that doesn't mean it's thick. It's still watery. It's the consistency of ink. It is not like our acrylic paint. All right. So we're starting to get a ball.
Now, Nathan and a couple other folks were in here were noticing that this looks like it's much more difficult to do this in watercolor than it is in acrylic.
No.
Is that no?
No. Different.
Different.
Different. Not, it's because I do both. Like I think like sometimes I might categorize. I'm going to add some more red through here. Let's add a new step up here.
All right.
Because we're going to add another layer in that top half.
Good. And you got an I love you from Athens, Greece.
Thank you from Athens, Greece. I appreciate that so much.
So far we love all the people from all over the world.
And come in here and add just a little bit of my red. Let's try to add a little more red. Building up that pigment. And when we go over dry paint with a wet paint, we call that a glaze. So that's how we do a glaze in watercolor. Now I'm going to come here with my black. And I haven't even rinsed out. Adding some very dark. I think I brought the black over too far.
See, I would be inclined to paint a secret scene or a
now notice I'm just rinsing out my brush, and then I dry it with a paper towel, and that lets me pick up some of the black.
It removed it.
It does. It really does. And so that is a nice thing that I can do.
Oh, it's a brush vacuum.
Yeah, like a little brush vacuum. Now I think I'm going to want to dry everything with a hairdryer, and I can't do that. I don't have a hairdryer.
Go, give me, you know what, I'll give you a second.
Yeah, I can work up here. It's okay. So let's give me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on my, I'm going to take my brush. I'm not changing brushes. This is just a number 8. Chances are I'll be able to paint most of what I'm doing. There, a little blue, a little more blue than what it is. And so I'm going to come on half of the little downward. And then over here, it's going to switch the half. We'll let that have a little seat. What we're doing here is we're tightening up the shadows and everything. I'm going to rinse out, and then I can very carefully sort of create a soft blend with a damp brush. So it is easier to blend than you might think. Now come get a little bit of my dark. Thank you. I'm going to just make this a little bit kind of rough and dry brush right here, so it's a little more like our reflection. But let's give everything a dry because I want to put down some good pigment on it.
Okay. Okay. We'll take a quick little break. And gosh, thank you guys. Thank you everyone who's been supporting us. Thank you so much, Deb, and I know we had Heather and Ramona. Thank you guys. I really appreciate all the support and love you guys have given us. All the support, everybody, the likes, the comments, the shares, subscribes, all that stuff is so awesome. Thank you guys so much. We really, really appreciate it. It makes a big, big difference, and we love that. That's the support. So, you ready for another step?
Yeah, let's give us another step. So now I'm going to get really into my red. Red.
Oh, that is red. I wasn't expecting it to be able to go that red. It didn't.
Yeah, it can go that red. I just got to get it there. A glaze over. That's where I go over something I've already painted that's dark with a dark color. I'm going to go ahead and crisp this up because I'll put some of it back with my acrylic. I'm going to get some dark color on here. A little Payne's gray. really inform that darker. I'll let that work through. Add some darker reflections. And just tap one down there, because there's a good one right there.
Oops.
What's oops?
I just didn't see you. I didn't see you.
Oh, it's like, what did I do?
No, I just, if I look away and I don't pay, sometimes you're a little bit off. That's okay. We got it back there.
All right.
Now, do you need
So we just have a loose little version of that in there. I'm going to come underneath, and it's okay that it's wet. I'm going to get some dark. Do I wet?
when you're drying it, do you have to be careful of the direction of the air?
You have to, yeah, I don't. So I dry on my class so that you don't have to watch paint dry even longer than you normally do. I think it's best to allow, unless you've got something moving on you in a way you don't want and you're trying to slow it down or stop it, I think it's actually best to allow it to dry on the paper and develop. Like, we'll come back from our acrylic painting later and look at this, and it will have developed into almost a completely different thing. I'm going to add some little reflections kind of coming down, showing that it's bent there. And then we're going to take a hairdryer and dry everything.
Hairdryer.
Yeah,
everything.
because we didn't use Frisket to hold white, we'll put white back with either gouache or acrylic.
So we're going to see how that dries. I don't think it'll take too long to do this drying one, so we'll see. But yeah, don't forget to check out our website. There's a lot of really great tools and stuff there available to you. Sorry if my mic's a little bit low. Yeah, you check out our website. There's lots of great resources out there. There's a calendar. There's traceables. There's our project pages. Of course, there's our e-com store. There's our little school tools. We have all sorts of stuff that we've been working on out there, and we're going to continue to develop those. So,
All right. Now, sometimes with watercolor, I like to take a jelly pen, and I'll prime it all up, make sure it's got some ink in there. And I'll do some detail work with it. So I'll come here and add my downward demarcations. And then I'll put it back that way. Where they're bright but not that bright, I like a jelly pen. You could do a detail of a white brush if you wanted. I mean, you can put all kinds of reflections and things in. So where you're like, oh, wow, that's super tiny, then I can come back in with a brush pen. If I want to clean anything up, that's super doable. That's not hard. Now, it can be fun to come in. I'm going to use an acrylic brush right now because I want this to hold. I'm going to use an angle brush. I'm going to go ahead and use just a little bit of my white acrylic. Pure titanium white. I'll just come across here.
the bug says, y'all are unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I feel like we are, right? Now let's add a little reflection to the bottom of that ornament there. Now I get a little more water on this because the paper is thirsty, and I'm going to come here and add some of those little reflections.
Are you having trouble with the paper buckling at all?
Yes. So I haven't over wet it. You've seen, well, but you've seen that I've wet it, and if I don't know if John can catch this on the camera.
So I have to zoom back out a little bit.
And I'm not. I'm not sure.
I just go zoom up. There we go. We can see
that there?
just a little bit.
Yeah, that's all it is. So what will happen, I mean, sometimes people do a lot of stuff to flatten it out. I like the just pressing method where you just, after everything is all done and dry, you just put it in some place with weight like a pressed flour and press the paper out. Some people do like ironing. There's a lot that is out there. What I'll say is that I like that very, very much. You can even put a little bit down there. I was thinking it's so fascinating to add little reflections. Let's take a look over to overhead. Another thing that I can do, interestingly enough, if I felt like anything was too, I can come in, believe it or not, over here with a wet application. To get that kind of and so there'll be some like color that comes up through, and that works really well. I'm gonna rinse that out. I'll go ahead and take a damp brush and sort of soften these reflections just a little bit. So what that is the water is clean. I just wanted some of these to soften up a bit, and if the paper is still wet, instead of having a sharp edge, they will soften out. See how that softened them? There we go. That was in watercolor.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Deborah. So that's kind of how you would get that in on watercolor. Now, traditionally, I would want to use cold press paper because and a heavier one, I'd use 190 or what is the one I'm always using? I've got it down right here. I'll show you which one it is. My favorite pad for just watercolor. 300, 140 pounds. Okay, so this is 120 pounds. This is 140 pounds. A little heavier. It's cold pressed, but it has a sizing on it, and it's in a block. All the pages are glued together, so it doesn't. When it buckles, it restretches itself. Kind of a nice thing. But when you're just trying to practice, oh, I'm going to practice some watercolor. Oh, I'm going to practice some acrylic. A multimedia pad. I can get some pencil in here. I could do this in pencil too. I could do pencil study. I could try it in different ways, and then just figure out like how do I get that in my own work. All right. Now let's do acrylic.
On the dark, real quick before that you go on.
Oh yeah, before we go on.
Wanted to know, did you use Payne's Gray and a mix of ultramarine blue for the dark reflections?
Right here? Yeah, I put a little ultramarine blue to push my Payne's Gray a little further into the blue. I just like that. I could probably darken it up, but I'm just happy with where it is right now. For me, when I do stuff like this, it's just about where does color have to be? How do I build it up? How do I take it out? How does the medium perform? And looking at that object, like how would I tell that story of that object with the medium that I have? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes like when I'm looking, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool shadow. So I'll put a little more ultramarine blue into my Payne's Gray, even though my Payne's Gray tends to be a little cool as it is. The other thing that I could do is if I wanted to go through with a liquid masking agent, I could mask out all my white shapes and then paint very loosely, and then those would still remain crisp. Other ways to do it. Shall we move on to acrylic?
All right.
I think I need my coffee heated.
I'll do that.
So we'll come back and we'll look at them.
And we'll call this a new step.
A new step. And guess what I do in this new step?
What do you do?
I use my same thing to draw a circle. So I'm still using just the inside of my tape just to have a fairly even or similar size. We'll go ahead. I'm using my HB pencil. I'm going to sketch that up. It's right there. I put it there for you so you'd have an easier time getting it. I do like a bit of that. And then this had a bow up over it. And then an ellipse. Just drawing the loose little metal scalping that will be there for the silver cap. A loose little circle there. And I don't even need to sketch in where my reflections go because I'm going to be layering. And I'll go ahead and give myself an ellipse for a shadow. So that's no problem. And if I want to lift any of that up, I just come in with my gummy eraser. And you can see that just lightly lifts the graphite, but it doesn't disrupt the paper in any way. So it's a pretty light sketch. I might work on that a little bit. And I can come and just give myself some lined information. John is doing my coffee right now. So on this, you're going to notice some things different in the acrylic. We're going to be working much darker colors, revealing lighter colors. So we're going to be like a pretty dark red to start with and then building up our brighter reds. And so you're going to see a kind of like, one of the things I think is interesting with watercolors, you see the painting a little sooner sometimes than you do with the acrylic, so you can hang in a little easier. And so I pay attention to like how I go dark into light instead of light into darker and darker and darker. I think it's fascinating. I'm going to keep using an angle brush. This is a synthetic angle brush with a firm filament. And I'm going to wait for John to come back and see how light that is. That is pretty light. So when you're looking for how light you want to sketch in on things, that's kind of how light you want to sketch in. Oh, and I have 32 techniques for watercolor if you just need a quick crash course over on my watercolor channel. I'm going to be doing watercolors over here for a while. All right, let's go back over here. We need a step, and I'm going to paint in the dark one. So I have to remember to be above my watercolor.
Okay, it's very light, yeah.
Right. Now, it won't be in a second, but it's right now. So I'm taking my 1/2-inch angle brush and a synthetic, and I'm going to take my red. I'll mix a little CAD into it, quinacridone, and a little ultramarine blue.
Yeah.
Paint all of the circle in with this dark color. I don't even worry about the reflections or any of it. So I will say too that it's not that one medium is better for realism than another either. It is that you just will often possess more skills in one medium than another for realism. So try not to judge a medium by the amount of realism you achieve with it or I achieve with it, because that's really just about a long earned skill set. Right now we're just learning about how our different mediums create objects on our surface. So I'm painting on paper with acrylic. I could have painted this all watercolor first and then come over it with acrylic to sharpen it up. So you can paint acrylic over watercolor, not really watercolor over acrylic. Doesn't really bind. So now I'm going to come here and make sure I've got my glasses on for the fussy bits. In between my little spike downs, I'll go ahead and bring a little red up. That's step one. Paint the ball red. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine blue and my Mars black. I'll mix them together.
Next step?
Yeah, next step. And let's make a very, very kind of minor gray. Wipe off on my paper towel. A lot more white. Kind of dry brushing in a curve. I'm just creating a little sense of that there is a shadow here. right? I'm thinking about the shadow. And keep adding white to it. There's a little pigment on my brush I wasn't expecting. And can even just come back with white. So it's just creating a little sense of weight or light. All right, so the room exists. Now I can come in and a little more of my Payne's gray. And my ultramarine blue. Still on my angle brush. Just work on the toe. And let's add a deeper shadow down here, right? We still need a shadow. I can kind of flick that out and be a little general about it. Not everything has to be explained super specifically. I'm just creating steps and stages of gray coming out so that we have a light. I'm going to put this aside. Now I'm going to grab my round brush for acrylic. And I'm in the same color mix. We can call this a new step. We're going to paint the cap. Ultramarine blue, Mars black, titanium white. And I'll just do kind of dark gray up here. And I'm using the number 6 sepia. I have a smaller one, but it's perfectly fine. And just paint in what is holding the Christmas ball down. See, just a thick opaque layer. So that's also very different. Like how dark we start out. We're kind of almost in our darker shadows, you know, and in the watercolor, we're working in our lighter values. It's interesting, like when I added oil pastels to like what I like to work with, one of the things I noticed was like oil pastels where they layered in similar to acrylics, but I only had so many layers to get before they stopped layering. I'm grabbing some just Payne's gray. And just painting in my lips with this dark color. No, actually that was Mars black. That panic moment, you're like, did I just grab watercolor? Okay. So I want all of this to dry, so I am going to dry it with my hairdryer and come back and we're going to hit it with another layer. And I'm going to sip my coffee, if I can ever get to my hairdryer.
Okay, so thank you guys. This is awesome. This has been a really interesting show. I really love to see the acrylic and the watercolor side of things. I hope you guys are enjoying this too. If you are, don't forget to give us a little likes and a thumbs up and do a little human buddy push something things at the bottom. We like to see those. And if you are interested, you can find out about supporting us on our Patreon group. You can go to our website. We have information on that. Man, it's just really kind of a nice day to see everybody.
And if you can see, we have similar buckling.
Oh, yeah?
Not as bad, right? Because it's not as wet. And then the acrylic starts to seal this paper. Where acrylic is an issue is that it wants to stick to other acrylics. So that's where people who work in books like this struggle storing it, right? They usually have to pull it out and frame it. But you'll notice that there is that there as well. A little bit of buckling. So short of pulling this out and doing what's called stretching the paper, which is not what you want to do at this stage of your art journey, just knowing that that's not atypical. If you over wet it, it can buckle a lot. So if you see so much buckling, you can't work the paper at all, you may have too much water. You may need to lighten back. You'll have to get used to knowing your paper. I didn't mention it, but this pad is for sale on our website. If one was looking for it. Okay. I'm so funny.
New step. Ready?
New step. Yes.
Did you get a sip of your coffee while we were there?
I did. Let me get another one though.
Another sip of your coffee?
We're almost done. I'm like on the downhill stretch and I'm like, let's go.
All right, that's good.
Okay. So up here, I'm going to take a little bit of my Cad Red and a smidge of my Cad Yellow. And the top of this ball, I'm going to paint with that slightly warmer red. Just has a little more yellow in it, so it's just a smidge of yellow. And I would say that there's almost like, if you bisect it like this, it kind of comes down to about here of that just slightly warmer red. Just a touch of yellow. And then as I come down to the bottom, I'll add a little bit of red and magenta together. So still a bright red, but notice that it's cooler. In other words, it's got more blue in it, right? It's more in shadow. And so that's, even though it's very bright, the other thing that you can do, a little more quinacridone, is also pay attention to how you're angling your shading there, and get a little bit of my ultramarine blue involved. Just making sure it's not so dark. So I have still some darker room to build on. You don't want to take away your darker room to build on. A little bit of my ultramarine blue and my red together. Curve that little reflection up over. Just painting. I haven't really changed brushes in a minute. Kind of curl another beginning of that shadow over here. And then I'll just do a flat brush stroke. In the center, flat and kind of curve left. I'm going to leave a spot between those two. All right, let's call out a step.
All right. Now, you color in acrylic. You layer these colors much more than you do in watercolor.
Yes.
Whereas in watercolor, you have to preserve the white spaces.
Well, and in fact, I have so much more room in how I can do it in watercolor, because if I came right here, right, let me just show you a thing here. I'm going to make the little top, and then we'll say that there's a little, so say I had a little watercolor that was like this.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to get a little bit of my blue. And pull down a little bit, but not much. And then I get a little bit of my red on here. Notice that I have these little sharp edges and stuff kind of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I can do with watercolor is tell these little tiny stories.
It is a tiny story.
Right?
You're just using that to shape it.
Yeah, you just come in and you're like, then you can, so you can paint with watercolor in this sort of very loose way, and then I'll just get some of this dark. Just tap it through the middle. And then I can just let that all blend out.
Right.
Right, and then just loosely paint that. So watercolor doesn't require me, add some just dark red there. And then we'll let that have a little sit for a while. It's just, it's weird. You can do this kind of sketching in watercolor that's really compelling. I might want to pull some of that black out. And also, like, if I'm here and I'm like, ugh, too much black. Look what I can do. Anything that's sitting there bugging me, I can adjust later.
Neat.
If I'm like, oh, I need more of you down here, well, I can adjust that. I can even make a shadow real fast. So there's this sort of immediacy I like. It doesn't really layer the same way. There's some more gestural and playful thought in that I like a lot. I'm going to take a little bit of my Cad Red and my Cad White together.
Makes those highlights, huh?
Yeah, some of that sort of like deflected, not as bright highlight, but definitely in there. I'm going to come across here and sort of think about that. Right there as well. I don't have to worry about the two littles, but it's just nice to have that there. Come back into this little moment, and I'm going to grab some of my white.
Just enjoy reading about people who are watching us, and just,
it's fun, right?
Thank you guys for sharing your lives. I love, if you haven't been part of the live chat, it's a great place to come and be. We have a great community here.
Adding a lighter color up there. And then I can come and say, all right, half of these are lighter. Not a huge highlight. I just have to be like, oh, hey, there's a highlight, right? Actually, I think this is pretty good. Come back into my gray. It's great. And I'll go ahead and mix some red into it. Now I'm going to add a little bit of that. Some of those little moments that are sketched, like they're implied little reflections. And this is a dry brush. Now I'll kind of dry brush this curve around here. I add that down here. And so even as I'm doing this, this is called studying, right? In art, when we practice just painting an object and practice the skills and seeing the object, what we're doing is studying. I'm going to add some depth to that reflection, I think. Maybe one right there. That's a pretty nice deep reflection. Again, that's a little bit of the Cad Red and the Mars Black. Now I'm going to make some orange. Actually, let's call a new step. Make some orange. And in the orange, we're going to get to our brown with our black. Look at us go. Add a little bit of the brass around. And then I can come in and get just a lot more yellow on there and maybe some white. Adding a little bit. See, when you add these little metal reflections to things, then it just starts feeling like it is. Grab some just orange for the outside. So you just want a little of that here and there, and then when you put a bright reflection on it, it just gets wow. I am going to go ahead and get a detail brush. I will grab a number 2 Precision. I'm going to go ahead and take some water over to my fluid white. Well, it's actually my heavy body white that I'm making fluid with just water. Detail brush. Make sure I'm happy with the load. Sometimes I'll check it on my finger. Just a little bit of reflection there. Tap a little bit right there. Just putting little, rinsing out, and I'm going to go ahead and get a little black. Sometimes it takes more black. So when you're working that down with a little bit of a thin brush, be sure to wipe it off every once in a while on a paper towel, otherwise you get these weird little hidden drops of water. Gonna add a little dark reflection down there. One there. Not quite black, but still pretty dark over here. Just showing that it's coming off that. Let's call that a step. Now I'm going to grab some just red.
Hold on a second.
Ah, step 16.
Actually, give me just a second.
Oh, I'm so sorry this is happening
No.
today,
There's a buffer thing happening, so we're gonna give it just a second.
This day has been a buffer day. I'm wondering if where we're at, we need to start recording these.
We are recording it, but hold on just a second. Because hold on, wait.
No, I know we record them. I'm not gonna paint. I understand.
Okay, now we're gonna come back with, for sure,
16.
a 17 step.
Oh, is it 17?
We're on 17, I think.
Oh, 16 was the last one you put up.
Yeah, now we're on 17.
I mean 16 right before you said wait a second.
Oh, did I? Okay, then
Yeah.
we're still going. 16.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to continue to bring this down here and add just a little bit of bright red a few places. I'm going to come here and I like to bring some saturated color into these worlds on occasion. I'll go ahead and add a little bit of a cross strike across there, so it's like super saturating that up. And then I'll take my round, switching from my 1/2 inch angle round. I'm going to go ahead and get a little of my white on here. Add a little reflection there. Just on the round brush, number 6 round brush. A little bit down there. Maybe a little bit right there. I like that. I might also kind of hot spot it a bit there because I like a hot spot. Highlight that. And then I think I will use my angle brush for the reflection, where I'm going to come here and just grab a reflection. I'm so sorry about buffering today, guys.
I think we got it fixed though. So one of the nice things
Little
is
reflection there.
when I see it buffer, I stop.
And a little one here. And then that's sort of the deal. All right, let's look at acrylic and watercolor. And remind me to find my gummy eraser later. I guess I should sign it. Both of them. That way John can time them up together. I don't know, man. I'll give it to you and then you have it, right? Yeah. I'm going to take a Sharpie pen and just sign my name. So there we go. But can you see how even in this little okay, and as this little watercolor sketch has dried, it's gotten weirdly better. I don't know how to explain it. There's just something about it that is super playful. So you can paint kind of a tighter, let's go overhead. I could do that cut. So we've got the acrylic here, and then the watercolor. So when I say to you guys, can I paint this in watercolor? I'm like, yeah. For sure. And can you paint in acrylic? Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And even in a loose sketching style, right? So like we've got kind of a tight watercolor over here. And then, you know, let me, this is why I love this. Is that not just the nicest tear out?
It is.
Let's see if I can.
Yeah, just hold on a second. I'll zoom out a little bit because I was kind of zoomed in. There we go. We can see both there.
Now, if I sat and also did this with pencils, and if I sat and then did it with oil pastels, I would then have long-term memory about these balls and that reflection. So later, when I'm in an art project that is maybe stumping me in some kind of a way, right, that I'm feeling, you know, maybe intimidated by or something, I have this knowledge, this long-term knowledge that hangs with me the next time I paint. So when I'm just messing around painting Christmas balls, I'm going to remember what reflections were here. I'm going to remember where this lighting created shadows if I do this and study the subject. I try not to use words like study on my show because I know some of us have like some real school trauma. This isn't like that. I wish school has like this all the time, right? I wish it was. But I mean, this is pretty cool. Watercolor, acrylic, watercolor.
Yeah, it is.
Acrylic, watercolor, acrylic. And you know what? You know how you're like, what if I don't have CAD red? Well, that's Pyro red. And you know how I'm always saying like it's kind of an exchange?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's kind of an exchange. We did these with primaries.
Wow, this is a fast class.
This is a fast class. So guys, I'm going to do some more of these because I really like this. And we've created a format and I think it's interesting. We'll figure out a way to speed it up a little bit, but where you guys can really see how these are constructed, because I think this act of studying teaches a long-term functional skill that lasts a long, 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 long time. So next class is chickens.
Chickens.
Some funny chickens. If you painted the bee, you gotta paint the chickens. It's so funny. Just singing. They're just like together. And they're colorful. I feel like they just speak to being an artist. They're in primary colors. I love them so much. Those are on Tuesday. Now, if you are a patron at the $15 level or higher, there is a Zoom class tomorrow. It is the first one. You can see about that on both the Patreon website, but also on our regular website. And if you're, I sent out a newsletter to everybody we had in that quota. So check your newsletters. And if you still don't see it, and you know you are, write us today. support@theartsherpa.com. I'm not here to be an art cop. We'll send you the link. Listen, I trust you to sign up at the level or higher. So if there's something not working with our tech, just email us. It's more important to me, that I make more seats at the table than I exclude. Does that make sense? Yep. I think our community is about just finding an extra seat. So if there's any trouble, email me and we'll be starting that. And that's going to be very, very interactive. And then I think some more of this, and I've got a beautiful pine tree I'm working on. That's something completely different than I've ever done. It's just a gorgeous landscape. It's just the tree is just old, and you know those like old Methuselah kind of trees, like bristle cones and that kind of. Very excited about that stuff right now. So snowy pines are coming up, and then we'll keep doing this. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any of this. Oh, and we're going to be dropping kids shows on you like crazy. So what happened with the kids show? So we did it, and it was good, and really y'all liked it. It's still on Facebook. You can find it on the website, the first 2 episodes. But we're going to refilm those because we figured out how it is we can make sure it's on YouTube, because we know that there was issues about buffering over on Facebook, which I think is more about some other internet things. But we'll make sure that that's there. It will premiere over there, and it will premiere over on YouTube. And then we'll be back into our Monday schedule. So those are coming. And honestly, if you're a grown up and any of this is interesting to you, you might want to show up, because we're going to learn perspective from scratch, and we're learning basic core concepts from scratch. And we're doing a fun project every week that's, suitable for all ages. So and I'm doing it so that the kids have a basis of understanding of art education in school, so they can do well at that. Acrylic, watercolor, acrylic, watercolor. I want to see you guys at an easel really soon. If you want your pad, it's. I don't know how long. We extended the coupon, so
Right.
hopefully you guys can get this also on sale. It's just I didn't know it was a link. Thought it was a word. So that being it, I love it. I just talk forever to you guys, because we're those people. We're the people where they're like, you don't have to go, but you can stay here. And then we got to go find a 24-hour deli because we still have 1,000 things to say to each other. And that's how I feel about you. We just still have 1,000 things to say to each other. So in that, I just want to send you into the world knowing that you're loved and valued. Make sure you take some time, drink some water, get some rest, self-care, be good to yourself. Be good to each other, and I want to see you in an easel really soon. Bye-bye.